Hello everyone, this is James Shore with another test-driven JavaScript video. I'm recording this on November 13th, 2012, picking up where we left off in the last episode. And this episode marks the start of a new chapter. In the last episode, we got basic DOM testing working, and what we were doing was taking our WeWiki Paint application, which is going to be our collaborative painting application, and getting started on single user painting. So what we want to do is on our WeWiki Paint page, we want to have a drawing area where people can actually do their painting. And our first story for that was to just create an empty drawing area and do that in a way that's tested. And that's what we've done. We've written some tests around that code and gotten the empty drawing area in there. And we're using Raphael for that. That is a cross-platform vector graphics library. So that's done. So now in this chapter, what I'd like to do is get actual lines drawn into that drawing area. And I'm hoping if that doesn't take us too long, then we'll also get to actually responding to user events in this chapter. I think that could be really interesting because of course you have to respond to events in any application you do. Not every application is going to be so specialized as to do drawing, but testing and responding to events is something you'll do anywhere. So that's what we need to do. The first thing I'd like to do, though, before we get into this is, so this is our current story is draw one line. Just draw a line, predefined, and test it. Before we get too far into that, I want to modify our home page for manual testing. I want to actually be able to see the Raphael div on the page. Once we have that going, let's spike drawing a line and review it manually. That way we just know that we're using Raphael correctly, because it's much harder to test something you don't understand. Once we have that working, we can redo line drawing code with a test and a test-driven way. And that should take us through. Okay, so let's go ahead and do that. So first thing I'd like to do is modify our homepage for manual testing. So if we go to, and eventually we're gonna do a smoke test around this to make sure that our homepage actually has the div embedded. But to begin with, I just want to do something more basic. Okay, so I've added a simple drawing area to our home page. You can see it here. You can see the styling is all messed up, but that's okay. I don't actually want this to be too polished yet because we haven't done it test driven. This is just so we can do some simple manual testing. So I'm just calling initialize drawing area on that element. So now what I'd like to do, so we've got that in. Now what I'd like to do is spike drawing a line and getting that in. I just want to prove that we can draw a line in Raphael before we start trying to test it, because again, it's way harder to test something if you don't know if it's working, if you don't know how to do it. It's kind of, may seem counterintuitive, but it's much better to test things to do test-driven development when you know how to build what you're testing. Then if you don't know how to build it, then you spend a lot of time wondering if the problem's in your test or in the production code or something else. So let's just draw a line. And the way you do that in Raphael is with the path command. And that takes a string where you move to a particular location, and then you draw a line from there to another location. And so let's go from x20, y30 to x20, y300. Let's do it this way. So that should give us a sort of slightly upward pointing line, I think. And we'll check that. And there we go. So perfect. So let's go ahead and check that in. So we spiked drawing a line with Raphael. Okay. So next, let's redo that line drawing code test driven. So we need to, and let's see. So to do this, we'll need to write a new test. So it should draw a line. And when writing a test, I usually like to start, if I'm not sure how I want to do it, I usually start with the function I want to call. So in this case, let's call a draw line method and pass in an x coordinate, a y coordinate to start from, and then an x coordinate and a y coordinate to finish off at. So that's going to fail because we don't have that function yet. Yeah. So now we'll create that function. So start x, start y, end x, end y. We won't have that do anything yet. I'm going to take this out. It's no longer relevant. So, okay, that's passing because we don't actually test anything yet. So now what we need to do is we need to assert that this has actually happened. Now, this is an interesting philosophical question. Most people, when faced with this problem of how do we test that we've done something, would turn to mock objects or fakes or some other sort of test double. And a test double is it's a object or a function that you write to take the place of a real world function. So we could write a Raphael mock, which would basically intercept all of the Raphael calls and store them off so we can make assertions against them. But you know what? I really don't like doing that, especially when we're talking about DOM stuff, because if we do that, if we actually mock out Raphael so that Raphael isn't touching the DOM, then we're not going to get any of the benefits of doing cross-browser testing. Because the thing is that Raphael will behave differently on different browsers. I've seen this myself in the past on my Rubu project. The reason Rubu doesn't work on IE8 is because I didn't test it on IE8. And Raphael works differently on different browsers. So we really, really need to test this on real browsers, which means we can't mock out Raphael. Even though that's sort of the easy way, mocking means that you're not actually testing how the stuff really works. So what we need to do here is actually test Raphael for real, which means that we need to have Raphael do something and then look to see what it did, rather than just saying, did we call Raphael? Because that's not the interesting problem here. It's, writing the code to do this is theoretically trivial. We just say, paper.path m start x, blah, blah, blah. It's going to be trivial code. The problem is not writing that code. The problem is getting it to work on IE8 and Safari and everything else. So we can't mock it out. I think people take mocks. Mocks are very much the easy way out. They allow you to say, did I call this method? But calling functions isn't the purpose of your code. The purpose of your code is to do stuff. And when you when you use mocks in your tests, you are running the risk of not testing anything interesting. So anyway, off the soapbox. So let's go ahead and get this thing up and running. We need to let's get the drawing area in there. Let's get the initialization in there. And then, let's see, we've got some, okay, so that should all still work. It does. So now the question is, how do we actually test this? Now, I don't want to use mocks, as I said, so what we need to do is actually look at the way Raphael has modified the DOM. Now, we don't need to test Raphael itself. We can assume Raphael works. What we need to do is see if it works the same way on all of our different browsers. So I looked at the Raphael documentation earlier, and there's a couple of functions that might be useful to us. The first is paper.forEach, which allows us to loop through all the elements in a paper. So we can say, how many elements have been drawn and potentially do stuff. And then once we have an element, there's the element.node function, which actually gives us the underlying DOM object. So that's got a lot of potential. And there's also a get subpath, which may allow us to assert that we did what we thought we did without looking at the actual DOM element. So we're going to try that. But I think first what we want to do is we just want to assert that there was one drawing element. So we can use this paper.forEach, which will give us an element, and just say just increment a counter, and then at the end say we expect total elements to equal 1. So we've drawn one line, and we expect that to equal 1. So let's see if that works. So right now I'm expecting this to give us a failure because it should say 0, missing semicolon. So it should say that it's expected 0 to equal 1. Perfect. So now if we go in here and we do something, we'll say im11l22, deliberately putting the wrong value in here, so we have to test that as well. We don't have paper. Okay, so we need to pull that out. Okay, that worked. Perfect. So this does make me wonder if we should do this as a proper object. Rather than a singleton, an effective or a global as it is now. Okay, so we've got, and if we do this again, we might get 2 elements. Yeah, we got 2 elements. So perfect. Okay, so we've got it drawing a line. What we don't have yet, though, is we don't have it actually looking to see that the line was correct. So let's go ahead and pull out this into an array. And here we'll push each element into that array. And here we can say elements.length. So basically, just rather than incrementing a counter, we're storing the elements off. And it would help if I called a function. Okay. So that's good. But now we have an element, so we should be able to say, well, let's just ask this, what our 0th element looks like. I don't know what's going to happen if we do that. It's an element, and that just makes everything go wonky. All right, we'll have to restart Testacular. There, got everything working again. So yeah, we don't want to dump the element. Never mind. So it looks like that element may actually be a DOM element. Maybe that's been decorated with some functions. I don't know. Or maybe trying to dump it just got into the DOM element. Whatever it is, that is our time for today. So that's where we'll pick up next time. What we're going to do is we need to figure out how to inspect Raphael paths. So that's what we'll pick up with next time. Thanks for watching, everybody. I will see you then.